Welcome to part 2 of my best to worst ranking of Frogwares Sherlock Holmes game series. That is a mouthful. If you haven't seen part 1, the link is in the description below. Please check it out. We're moving into the bottom 4 now, so from here on out I'm going to be a little harsher on these games, particularly 7 and 8. Please remember to like, subscribe, and if you want to support me, head on over to Ko-Fi or Coffee. The link is in the description below. Thanks guys.
This moment is a turning point for many people.
Oh my fuck!
Sherlock Holmes in the Case of the Silver Earring is a very simplistic game. But we do see a new direction and some of the future elements beginning to settle here. The game was released in 2004 and did exceptionally well for what it is, essentially a pixel hunt. Pixel hunts, for those younger gamers who might not know, is essentially looking for tiny items on a screen. Kinda like a seek and find, but just a little bit more difficult. It is very easy to miss some of these, and it can get quite frustrating. I love Frogwares, I really do, but don't ever play the Persian carpet, you will throw something out the window. Most likely yourself. In the story, Holmes and Watson are both invited to a Melvin Bromsby's birthday party. While Bromsby is giving his speech, he is shot dead in front of the crowd. And it's up to Sherlock Holmes to figure out who did it before an innocent person goes to jail. The story's intrigue truly begins at the very start when Holmes easily points out the strange setup of the dining room, the odd guests, and the party's overall bizarreness. From there, it evolves into a seriously fun mystery.
Yes, there's something of the devil in this.
What I really love about the story and mystery is it feels like it could have been written by Arthur Conan Doyle himself. It's a true Holmesian mystery. It's simplistic with some interesting twists and turns, and it keeps a laser focus on telling that compelling story and mystery. I really love both. They have good pacing, moves about from area to another quite seamlessly, and it is a compelling mystery. You do care about these characters and you want to help them.
Good God!
And in typical Holmesian tradition, there is a wonderfully dramatic ending, although it did need a lot of explaining and exposition, but I loved it overall. The characters are great. Holmes and Watson are portrayed well. There are one or two rather funny scenes which captures the unique humor from the books as well. Watson in particular feels a lot like the Watson you might see in the Granada Sherlock Holmes series played by Edward Hardwicke, which just endeared me to him.
Holmes, you will get no argument from me, as this dish is delicious.
Holmes is his usual smug and smart self. He is well portrayed, and the rest of the characters are interesting and serve the story well. Really, no complaints here. The environments is really where this game also pops. The whole setting, along with the environments, feels organic and realistic. I feel like they took their time to make sure everything made proper sense and fitted together. And for that, I'm always grateful when it comes to mystery games in particular. There is one really cool environment where you have to traverse through a forest. It might drive you a little crazy because you can get lost. Like, seriously lost? Like, completely lost? Like, where the hell am I?
This is hell.
But I felt some awe for the amount of effort that must have been put into this part of the game. Now, I don't focus a lot on graphics and visual, but I can certainly appreciate the time it must have taken to make this section all those years ago. And this little game has some seriously nice atmosphere. I love these areas. They're so dark and dreary, and there's quite a wide range of areas you'll be exploring. The only main problem I have is gameplay. It is a pixel hunt, as I stated before, so you have to find tiny things on the screen, and it can get a little exhausting. And then we have some levels that are almost impossible to do because the triggers are so tight that you just can't get past the area. For those who have played this game, the sound of dogs barking will most likely give you PTSD.
What now? Who's there?
Other than that, the movement is clunky and slow. The puzzles are okay, and it at least fits in with the overall look and feel of the game, but it's nothing to write home about. I do have one thing I really love in this game, and that was the question and answer rounds. Essentially, they would ask you a list of questions, and you had to sit down and try and answer those questions with your list of evidence, clues, and dialogues. I really love that, because it forced you to actually pay attention and find the right answers yourself. I really loved this aspect, but they definitely refined it in Crimes and Punishments. But once you get into it and past those blasted dogs, it is surprisingly fun. I personally don't mind older games, and Silver Earring is one of those games I'm always tempted to play just for its story and characters. Not the best, but still one I will play in a pinch. Much like Silver Earring, this game can honestly have been an adventure written by Arthur Conan Doyle.
It is obvious.
I don't have a lot to say about it for reasons that I will explain a little later, but I will say that it is quite relaxing and atmospheric. Sherlock Holmes and the Mystery of the Mummy was released in 2002. As a result, the game is not as sophisticated as some of the other games on this list, and it does suffer for it. The story is quite simple. A future niece contacts Sherlock Holmes in regards to her uncle who passed away. She wishes you to explore his eccentric home and find out what happened to him. His home is filled to the brim with Egyptian artifacts, and there are some dangerous traps about.
And a room full of Egyptian relics. Does Lord Mudcap have a big collection?
And that's essentially the story. You explore a creepy mansion and try to find a missing person. However, it does evolve, as someone is in the mansion with you, and you're not sure if it's friend, foe, or something far more terrifying. You do get into some serious trouble. The conclusion to the mystery was really good, and I had a lot of fun with it. We only really get to meet and get to know Sherlock Holmes, and he is quite a quirky character overall.
A whiskey bottle. At least I won't die of thirst.
They tried to bring a kind of 60s crime films vibe to the game, and it really does work. I like it. Sherlock Holmes is his same smug self, and his commentary can be quite funny and goofy at times. Watson makes a brief entrance at the end of the game, but his character is all over the place and not that good.
My dear Holmes, I've spared you a lot of unnecessary investigations.
It really feels more like Lestrade I'm talking to rather than Watson. The environments are spot on. Atmosphere and darkness oozes off of the screen. The areas can be quite creepy and the exploration feels very natural. Moving around the areas is not as fun, as your character has tile-based movement, so it's not as smooth as it could be, and this hurts the exploration a little. But yeah, I like the environments. It's nice and creepy. This is the first game in this series, so although it's not the most complicated game, we do see some groundwork that will be carried over to future games. The gameplay is very simplistic. You wander around, find items, and solve puzzles. It's a 3D puzzle adventure, essentially. Like I said before, the tile-based movement can be a little jarring, but the biggest problem is something I simply cannot get away from. It is next to possible to play this game today due to a mouse input error that inverses everything. To top it off, it crashes and it's kinda difficult to play on PC. This is partly the reason why I can't really give a solid opinion on the game, because I simply cannot play it anymore. The Mummy is a simple point-and-click adventure with some good 3D graphics. For its time, it was quite good, and if they ever did a remaster, I would play it in a heartbeat again. Just so many good memories locked into this little game. Now this is the point where I start to get very hard on these games. I will try to keep my temper in check, but I can't make any promises. Devil's Daughter. Oh boy, this game. Out of all the Sherlock Holmes games, I believe The Devil's Daughter was probably met with the most criticism out of all of them. This game was released in 2016, follows on from Crimes and Punishment, and continues the story from Testament. In this game, Sherlock Holmes has an adopted daughter called Kate. She is a sweet girl who loves her father dearly, but then a strange woman, Alice, moves in next door and she slowly starts to turn Kate against Holmes. The overarching story is fine. It's intriguing because it dives into the darker part of the occult, but at the same time, it just doesn't utilize these elements as well as The Awakened had. Awakened worked around the problem of magic in a logic-based game by making the mystery part bigger than the actual source material. That might sound counterintuitive, but the flashes of darkness we perceived were enough to keep our interest and give an edge to the mystery. And although we could, in theory, explain everything away, certain elements still left a tinge of mysticism to it. They were careful to keep the story grounded at all times and keeping the mystical elements more difficult to guess. That is not something that they carried over to the new Awakened, clearly.
Take your little mouth, Greta. You've said enough already.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine.
Oh boy. But Devil's Daughter just blasts in all the way, and it breaks the grounded logical stories Arthur Conan Doyle so loved telling. But it does have some interesting imagery, and it did keep me guessing where it was going, so although not a great mystery, the main story is at least perfectly fine. Now it follows the same formula as Crimes and Punishment. You have a total of 4 unique cases, with the final one the conclusion to the main story. The single case mystery sometimes makes sense, sometimes they don't, especially when it contradicts itself. But it's not all bad. As hard as I am on this game, it does feature one of my favorite moments in the entire franchise and possibly in all of my gaming experience. This happens in case 4. Essentially, there's an accident and a crossroads, and Holmes and Watson have to go out and help everyone, and then figure out how the accident occurred and what happened. It was just such a unique setting and a lot of fun to play through. I do wish they would do more of this in games, as this was really exciting and quite fun. Now let's move into the worst part of this game. Holmes and Watson, the characters. The biggest problem in this game by far is Watson and Holmes' interpretations. They are so out of touch with their namesake that they feel like completely different people. Sherlock Holmes' design is the first issue, where the original had a receding hairline, piercing grey eyes, or green eyes, high cheekbones and a big nose. This Sherlock is a bit of a pretty boy, a more conventional, handsome look. This in of itself is not really a problem. Having a different looking Holmes is actually never an issue. It is how the character is conveyed that matters, and if this character fits in with a series that has been established. And this one misses the mark badly. Sherlock Holmes in Devil's Daughter is in short a boring dad who is trying to be cool. It's very strange. He walks with a flair, he has a pretentious air of confidence about him, and handsome enough to have the ladies swoon over him. He struts, he doesn't stride. He rolls his eyes a lot because he's too cool and too smart for everyone around him, and he talks very fast to show how smart he is and how very impatient. Couple this with his looks and we essentially get a completely different character than the one we all know and love, especially from Crimes. It's a drastic change between Crimes and Devil's Daughter, and this is why I call him Sherry Holmes, because Sherlock Holmes is so 1892. It really does feel like someone trying to pretend to be Holmes, specifically an American. Ironic when we have another character in the game who is an American who tries to pretend to be Holmes. The writer's becoming self-aware, maybe? But yes, it really does feel like some sort of imposter. And it's even worse when this is a direct sequel to Testament, where Holmes was still Sherlock and not this Sherry character. So it just hurts the flow of the story and the continuation. But the moping, oh my god, the moping. He mopes about his life, he mopes about his daughter, he mopes about anything he can mope about, to the point that you just want to shake him and tell him to grow a pair and stop being such a child. What happened to the ice-cool, steely automaton Sherlock Holmes we loved in the earlier games? He's apparently been kidnapped and being held captive while this imposter plays pretend for a while. The worst part about this, though, is that we had a very interesting premise for the story. Sherlock Holmes has a daughter. This is not something that we've seen before, at least not I've seen before, and it would have been interesting to have seen the Carrie Shale version of Holmes trying to connect to a person. He's not a person that connects easily. Watson is a bit of an exception and he only tolerates Mycroft. How would he, as Carrie Shale's Holmes, have tried and managed to create a connection to a younger child? That would have made a far more interesting story than this moping dad. Watson doesn't fare a lot better, but he is serviceable. He is a bit more active in this game, but he's barely in it. To top it off, his clothing screams of a sort of fashionable 1800s pimp. But don't worry, they are both very hip and modern and suave and sexy, if that is any consolation to all the swooning viewers out there. At least they move fine. Yay for gameplay. Let's move on to the gameplay. Its mystery-focused and clue-driven gameplay is well-balanced, well-implemented, and even evolved a little from Crimes and Punishments. You can actually make your own deductions throughout the game, and you can draw incorrect conclusions if you're not observant. This element in particular makes you feel like a detective, especially since those incorrect conclusions stick and affect how you see the characters in the world for the rest of the game. This gives all of your deductions a bit more weight. You have a bit of freedom to explore this time around. It is so much fun walking around London. The place is thick with atmosphere and characters, and you see a lot of love was put in here. But that is where the positives for gameplay unfortunately stop, due to 3 words that have become the bane of my existence. Quick time events. Frogwares has this strange love for quick time events, and I wish that they would abolish it from their gameplay. Quick time events are time-sensitive prompts that you need to trigger quickly, otherwise you fail the event and you have to repeat it. Tomb Raider from 2015 had these aplenty, and the year after, Devil's Daughter decided to embrace it with a big smile, and after that Frogwares decided that this is the only way to make games. Now, to be fair, in Crimes you got these intense quick time events, but they were few and far between, and if you mucked it up, that was it. The victim died or the criminal got away, and that was on you for not reacting fast enough. Your poor reaction had a consequence in the game, so that is why it was used so sparingly. A quick time event is usually quite annoying, but giving it a tangible consequence, whether you succeed or not, gives the QTE a weight, which does weigh it down with tension. Heavy Rain based its entire bloody gameplay around this, and I've played that thing 3 times, so quick time events can be done well, but it is not done well in Devil's Daughter. In Devil's Daughter, they designed the game so that Sherlock Holmes can now die, but of course he doesn't really die, he just respawns, so it instantly takes away any possible tension and just becomes a nuisance and trial by error, which destroys tension. Oh boy. There's an example I'd like to share with a bomb you need to defuse. The bomb is thrown through your window and you need to defuse it. No shit, Sherlock. If you cut the wrong wire, the bomb explodes and you all die. The first time this happened, I started laughing because the comedic timing was just so good. I do understand they wanted to add more tension by upping the stakes, a bomb, but they instead lowered the tension because we can and will replay those stakes several times over because it's linked to a puzzle, and a puzzle is by design trial and error, and that takes away any sort of real danger because how else are we going to progress? Just play the bar scene and get back to me. Now, let's get into the environments. The environments are filled with atmosphere and details that enhance the exploration. Being able to once again traverse into these streets of London is a treat, and they went through a lot of effort to bring the city streets to life. You can interact with some parts, go into Scotland Yard, speak to some people. There is this huge world to traverse and enjoy, and although it's not a dedicated open world, it's a pretty fun to just walk around the streets for a while. There's a lot of love put in here. I also love the fact that the game doesn't give you a marker and that you need to find the street, the name, address yourself. This instantly makes you more aware of your environments and makes you appreciate the world even more. But yes, the environments are really damn brilliant. The variety is okay. Mostly you'll be walking through London, but they did try and utilize it as best they can. In closing, Sherlock Holmes' Devil's Daughter is not a good game, not a good look, but there are some elements to enjoy if you really want to play the game. I do still play it every year because it follows on with the story, except it doesn't, because screw you all, you forgot about Barnes, you absolute bastards.
Whatever is the matter with you, Watson? Pray tell.
This letter on the table. Holmes, read it.
Before I talk about the final one on this list, I need to make one thing clear. I love all these games. I love Frogwares, and I'm immensely grateful that I do have this series to play. But this game can burn in hellfire. Nemesis is hands down the worst game in the Sherlock Holmes series. This is the only game I have left half finished twice. But let's cover the basics and look at some positives before I have a conniption. The game was released in 2007, exactly 1 year from Awakened, and does in some respects follow on from that game. The story is about Sherlock Holmes, who is trying to catch the world-renowned cat burglar Arsène Lupin before he can rob Britain blind. This setting is actually pretty cool. Lupin is another fictional character from France who was created by Maurice Leblanc in around the same era that Arthur Conan Doyle wrote about Holmes. The writer of Lupin very much wanted Sir Doyle to do a collaboration where the world's greatest detectives goes up against the world's greatest cat burglar. Doyle outright refused, and we never got a real crossover between these two great characters. But Frogwares has got our backs, and they made Sherlock Holmes Nemesis, and thanks, I hate it. The story is simple enough. A series of burglaries occur in Europe, leaving the police dumbfounded in who could be the perpetrator. Said perpetrator sends Holmes and Watson a letter, calling them out and telling them in a roundabout way that he's going to steal 5 precious treasures from London, and Holmes is welcome to try and stop him. The gauntlet has been thrown down, and Holmes and Watson set off to stop that darn Frenchman. Through a series of events, he manages to steal everything except for the final item, where Holmes finally stops him in time, proving that they are both masters in their craft. And that is the story. Now let's get into the problems. drawn-out monologues and info dumps abound in this world, and although yes, Sherlock Holmes did love his monologues, opening up your game with one that lasts about 5 minutes is painful, and it just keeps getting worse when we consider the puzzles. The mystery itself is hurt both by the characters who are wholly out of character and those puzzles that have caused many a player to chuck their screens out the window. The game plays exactly the same as Awakened. You walk around, pick up items, talk to people, and of course solve puzzles. The game warns you at the very start that it will be difficult and that you will need your wits about you to stop Lupin. This is fine. I like a challenge. But what on God's green earth were they thinking with some of these puzzles? There is one scene at the very end where you have to weaken a rope, and instead of doing the logical thing of getting a footstool and a long pole and maybe a knife tied to a long pole, or perhaps one of those handy spears that's really 10 feet behind you in a tower you explored not a day ago, you have to make hot air balloons. I kid you not. You have to make 2 small hot air balloons with random crap lying around to burn the rope and weaken it, and this will somehow weaken the rope enough without burning it through. Where is the damn logic in this? The best part is you need to figure this out from a pamphlet you find in a random guard's room. Like, seriously? All the while Holmes tells you,
Lupin could be finished in his work any moment. I must make haste.
If you weren't trying to be the world's most convoluted detective, then I'd actually give a damn. For now, shut up and be grateful I'm helping you. In short, the gameplay is painful, frustrating, and must be played with a guide next to you. Although they do have some fun puzzles, like getting all the birds in the Tower of London, and a few quirky jokes here and there, it's overall just a damn mess. But the biggest issue by far are the characters. Holmes is fine. He's the same old Holmes as before with a little variation to his character. That's good, great, love it, let's move on. The problem comes in with Watson. Now, for those of you who don't know, in the books, Watson is a kind, honorable, self-sacrificing individual with a lot of passion in him. He cares, but one of his most striking attributes is his undying loyalty and faith in Holmes. He trusts Holmes in all things because he has faith in Holmes's abilities. Holmes in turn becomes stronger through Watson's faith, to the point that he calls him in The Hound of the Baskervilles his conductor of light, a person who inspires him to be better. It's a really beautiful symbiosis, and one that has defined the relationship between Holmes and Watson for years. And they fucked it up. They turned Watson into a conniving, lying, petty, stupid fool. There's a particular scene where he received a black envelope, and when Holmes reads the contents, which is clearly a poem from Lupin, Watson's response is,
Incredible. Lestrade has also started using poetry.
like, what the hell? For those who want to avoid spoilers, jump to this timestamp. During the story, Watson steals Holmes's Legion medallion to get a turtle. Is this a thing? Really? He doesn't tell Holmes about any of this, and he does try to retrieve it again, but it turns out that it disappears, and he enlists the help of a journalist to get it back. The journalist does, but expects Watson to help him out at a later date. Watson never tells Holmes about this journalist because he's worried Holmes will lose his temper. Of course, the journalist asks Watson to let him into a secured area, and it turns out the journalist was actually Lupin. After this, Watson comes clean. He's very sorry about it all, and Holmes forgives him fully. But then, only 10 minutes later, Watson has the audacity that when he figures out where Lupin is going, he calls Holmes jealous and childish for not having figured it out first. What the hell? That is not Watson. It is forced conflict, and I hate when a series or a game puts down another character in order to rise another into something great. You don't have a right to make a character look good when you had to crush another into the dust to reach that point. But rant over, let's get into something a bit more positive. I'm going to end this on a slightly more positive note because in this game is another one of my favorite gameplay sequences in the entire franchise. The environments are very well done. We have museums and the Tower of London and an art gallery, even Buckingham Palace, and I just feel like they went through a lot of trouble to make excellent areas for us to explore. But one in particular captured my fancy, the London Art Gallery. All you can do here is walk around and click on paintings, but Holmes actually gives you information about the painting, a brief history of the artist and sometimes of the painting itself. This all has to do with puzzles, but there are around 50 paintings in this gallery, and each of them has a brief description from Holmes himself. I just love all the effort that went into this, and wandering through the art gallery and learning all I can about these paintings. And this is a lot of effort to go through for a single puzzle, to be fair. That is a highlight of this game, and one that I absolutely want to shine a light on, because man, that is just well done. A lot of effort for a single puzzle. I love this section. But in closing, this game is terrible, both in gameplay and story, but if you want to complete the set, just be sure to have a guide next to you, and don't roll your eyes out of your skull when Watson acts like a dwindling IQ dumpling. And that is my whole story wrapped up. It took a while to finish part 2, sorry about that, but I hope you all really enjoyed it. Awakened will be coming out in March or April. I don't know if I will be playing the new Awakened. The demo did not do too well, and I don't know if you guys want me to do that. But if you do want me to, just let me know and I'll give it a wing and I'll give you my thoughts on it. Thank you all so much for watching and have an amazing day.